All right, looks like we're live. Thank you guys for coming. We're going to go deep into the subject of 1111 tonight. 1111 is a glyph of higher orders of symmetry, basically. And it has a special place in my heart because the very, no, it wasn't the very first synchronicity, but it was one of the most improbable. And we'll get into the reasons. There were like layers and layers and layers of weirdness. And also, it had conceptual continuity, like things that were connected to it that were very synchronistic continued to develop over the coming months. And what really got me about it, is that, greetings, I had never heard of 1111 at the time, and it wasn't until like a year later that I mentioned it to my then fiance, and she was like, 1111 is a thing. I was like, 1111, make a wish, something to do with synchronicity, and I was like, what? Excuse me? So that brings us to the present, because over the last couple of months, I have been really interested in fractals and holography. What? Audio sounds weird? Let me see if I can fix that real quick, sorry. Probably yeah, my bad, guys. Sometimes, for some reason, when I turn off the effects channels in Reaper, it doesn't turn the effects off, so. Let me know if that fixed it. Let me adjust the volume. Is that better? Probably. Check, check, check. All right. Should be good, right? Por ahora. So yeah, please let me know if that fixed it. Where were we in our little tale here? So over the last couple of months, I've been looking a lot into the function of 11 in mathematical symmetry and holography and fractal, and there's a lot of really interesting stuff there. In addition to that, just a couple of days ago, I started looking really deeply into 11 and even 1111 in ancient cultures around the world, and it turns out that it has pretty much ubiquitous symbolism throughout the ancient world. So that led me to check for relationships with Sirius, because Sirius has a similar reputation as sort of a beacon or a transmitter for a certain type of consciousness all around the universe, I guess, but particularly here on Earth. And interestingly, our sun has an 11-year solar cycle that the ancients in some places connected to Sirius, because they said that the energy or the consciousness, which we would call electromagnetism, is amplified. The Sirian signal is amplified at the solar peaks. Why do I look so dark is that my screen settings, or do I really look that dark? We're good now? Okay, cool. So let me share a little bit of the story, and then we're going to look at some data that I scraped together with AI. So my introduction to all this came, if you've been following me for years, you've heard this. So this is for the new folks. I had just entered into this period of rapid awakening that I had not yet connected to the solar maxima. That would come a little bit later. So it was like in the early stages of this. And we had just gotten back from a Fish concert. It was my first Fish concert. And I have this weird thing with Fish. I don't really like their music or their songs, I guess. But there's a handful of them that I do like. And there are things they do in their improvisations that I really appreciate. So, it's a roll of the dice. I could have driven all the way from Colorado to Washington State and had to sit through a bunch of crappy Fish songs I didn't like. Instead, they literally both nights played every single song that I would have picked. And that was weird. And a lot of other really strange things happened. I'm not going to get into all the details, but that'll suffice, Like on the way home, I've lived with chronic fatigue syndrome for a long time, and I used to take Vicodin to manage the symptoms of fibromyalgia and whatnot. And I had ran out, And I was like in the middle of nowhere in Northern California at a campground, and I told my girlfriend, like, man, I wish we could just find somebody that had some Vicodin right now. And we walked up like another 20 feet, and there was this guy in a pickup truck, and he's like, hey, you want to buy a motorcycle? And I was like, no. And he's like, how about some Vicodin? You know what I mean? Stuff like that kept happening. And so as we arrived back to Colorado, I don't remember what triggered this, but I started going on about how I wish I could just grow pot legally and play guitar and really commit to music. And as I'm practically yelling this, we pull up to the front of the in front of the grocery store, and the newspaper says medical marijuana legalized, 215 passes. And I was like, what? You know, because I was literally just yelling about this. And so I got some lights, and but we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves. So I think it was like the next day or a few days later, my girlfriend was an artist. So she was on the floor with a 24-inch ruler. And for whatever reason, she asked me about the numerology of number 11. I didn't know a whole hell of a lot, but I started talking about it. And then the song 11 by Tool comes on. You know, I think she had her iPod on shuffle or whatever. And then she starts kind of freaking out. And, you know, I'm trying to like explain things to her, and she's like grumbling. And I'm like, what is something wrong with you? And she's like, I don't know what. And she just paused, and she's like, no way. The ruler had two 11s printed on it, and it wasn't just that. It had an 11 printed where the 23 should be, which is another number associated with synchronicity. And if you think about this, it's really difficult to explain how that would happen because, you know, it was a major manufacturer of rulers. How they would make the mold incorrectly and no one would notice. So they printed, what, like 1 million of these rulers with the 211? Yeah. It's just really odd and difficult to explain. So that was pretty baffling. And I started really thinking about this because I had experienced a lot of highly improbable synchronicities at that point that all seemed to have conceptual continuity and like a personal meaning for me. But I also think that there is a mechanistic basis that facilitates all of the phenomena in the universe, right? There is no woo. That's not, in my world, that's not what becoming spiritual means. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden the rules of reality break down and impossible shit starts happening for no reason. You know, so I considered, is it possible that tomorrow or the next moment only exists as like a probability cloud until awareness arrives and then everything collapses into something? And so a ruler with two 11s on it could be configured in that way. Or, you know, how do these things end up? I'll give you another example, right? So 2 or 3 days after the ruler, I was working with a guy, and we were pulling an awning off of somebody's deck, and the same girl called me, and she said, hey, there's bear in the tree in the front yard. And I was like, okay, cool, I gotta go because I'm working, you know, but I had her on speakerphone, so my friend who I had just eaten bear with at his house a couple days earlier, and this stuff is important to note, how these synchronicities almost seem like they're staged. You know, they're being set up, and the circumstances. For example, a guy that could identify bear claws happened to be present, heard the phone call, so I can't convince myself I'm nuts or something, you know. So anyways, I get off the phone and I pull the insulation out, and 3 bear claws fall out into the deck from behind it. And I was like, those have got to be parrot talons or something. And my friend walks over. He'd heard the phone call, so he's like, dude, you just ate bear stroganoff at my house 2 days ago. I just shot one. For sure, those are bear claws. And there's 1 claw for each bear. She said 3 bear. There's 3 claws. And I was like, yeah. You know, and that had me thinking too, like, okay, so what, did these bear claws just materialize? The universe just created them in this? No, that didn't happen. And I immediately realized that we were in Southern Ute territory. Also, there were a lot of Navajo people in that area, and it was very likely that it was some sort of blessing to place the bear claws somewhere in the structure, and it just happened to be there, and I just happened to pull them out at that moment. but still, that doesn't really negate the symmetry of it, I guess. And also, it's important to note that 1111 is this symbol of awakening, and so is the bear because they hibernate and then they awaken, right? So there's this line of conceptual continuity to it. About a month after that, I was living in a large house now with a big girl, and the same girl, but also a roommate. And this roommate was extremely reclusive. He had no social life at all whatsoever, so I have no idea how this even happened. But one day he came out to get me, and he's like, hey, man, I got this email from this Sundance chief, a Lakota Sundance chief named Golden Light Eagle. And he is inviting us to this like seminar or something in New Mexico. And I was like, okay, well, let's go. He showed it to me. There was a phone number. I called the guy. He gave me directions. And right before he hung up, he said, tell your little friend to come too. I was like, what? He's like, your little Navajo friend. I didn't know who the hell he was talking about. After I got off the phone with him, my phone rang, and it was this little Navajo girl that I barely knew, and I thought for sure she would say no. I was like, hey, you want to go with me to this thing, this Lakota guy? I don't even know what it is, really. And she's like, sure. So we go down there, and it turns out that all we had to do to pick her up was, like, pull off to the side of the highway, let her get in, and keep going. Like, she was literally, like, perfectly on the way. And we get there, and a whole lot of weird shit happens right away. This guy that looks just like me comes up to me. Our eyes locked. There's like this charge that we exchanged. He goes, I haven't seen you in like 40,000 years. And I was like, what? And he's grabbed me by the arm, and he's like, we got to go to the ritual. And I'm like, ritual or ceremony, I think he said. And so he drags me around the back of the building. And there is this Hawaiian shaman named Reynolds Kamakawi'ole, who there's like a circle of 11 people closing. And when I walk into it, there's 12, plus he's the 13th. And he calls the wind, may the wind blow to confirm the power of our prayers, and the wind blows so hard that gravel, like, psh. And so I go in, and I'm going to skip a lot, but I couldn't make it past anyone without some kind of interaction like that happening at this thing. And Golden Light Eagles talk. He just opens it with the 1111 frequencies, blah, 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 blah. So the ruler, and now we get this weird message and end up at this thing in Farmington, and that's the message of this native man, R.I.P. Lauren Zeffier, that was his real name. By the way, you guys, do me a favor, hit the like button, share, subscribe. We are demonetized, so we don't get any support from YouTube. We still have space at our retreats, our medicine retreats in the jungle, end of January through February, and then we also have dates throughout the spring and summer. So if you're interested in that, shoot me an email. Appreciate y'all. And let's see, where are we going with this? Okay, so that was my introduction to 1111, right? So I guess around this time, I was just sitting on my couch and I was thinking, what could do this? And the term higher orders of symmetry just kind of popped into my head. And I was like, what is that, though? And I knew it was correct. And I still don't totally have, like a empirically provable answer for this, or at least nothing I can articulate in that way, But interestingly, a couple of years ago, I just stumbled across a quote from Jung where he said, synchronicity is the result of higher orders of symmetry. So pretty remarkable thing. And here's what happens. This I can't explain, I think. Our being, our consciousness, our mind, we're like 90% automata, governed by the subconscious, according to psychology, right? And what awakening really is changing that ratio, so that the governance becomes more and more a matter of our sovereignty, right? And another way to think about this is that there is greater symmetry between the conscious and subconscious parts of our being. The subconscious is representative or fundamentally connected to, or both, I guess, the external world. So 11 being the number of magical expansion, which, by the way, I think is connected to the sun's solar cycles, and studies have shown, I mean, I knew this from experience, but studies have shown that mystical experiences and reports of synchronicity and even revolutions and all kinds of things along those lines dramatically increase with the peak of the solar cycle. So 11-year solar cycle, magical expansion. The magical expansion in the conscious mind is 111. The subconscious is the other, or you could think of it as your internal 11 and external 11. You are coming into a greater degree of homeostasis, and that is reflected in your internal experience, because from the most fundamental level of reality at the subquantum, we have Calabi-Yau manifolds and A brains and B brains that are arranging particles in exactly symmetrical but mirror reversed process called mirror symmetry. And so at every different scale, that's repeated. And that includes our, conscious interface and experience with the universe. Farmington. Yeah, how'd you know it was in Farmington? Spikes? That is true. It definitely was where we went to meet Golden Light Eagle was Farmington, New Mexico. The part of the reason is that it's a big UFO landing area, not Farmington, but Aztec, New Mexico, a little bit north. And it is an interesting site. I've been there quite a few times. A little bit off the highway, you go into the desert, and there's this big, perfectly circular area where none of the plants have ever grown back. And in the top of it, there's something in the center. I don't remember what, maybe just an indentation or something. But up at the top of the circle, there is a concrete thing that they have taken a core sample. It's not the right word, but you guys know what I mean. And it's like 18 feet deep. And they say that the military anchored like a crane or something there so that they could drag the thing over to open it up. And there was something like 14 farmers, witnesses in like the 1940s, late 1940s, I think, that testified to having watched the military pull these beings out of this thing. And so anyways, yeah, that's why they chose that spot. So I guess, I explained the mechanisms behind it to the degree that I'm probably capable. So let's pull up this research and talk about some of the mathematical properties and the functions and holography, and also some of the connections to Sirius, which is super cool. For those of you that might not know about Sirius, I had, I'm sure you all know about it, but maybe not these details. I had an experience years ago where I was told what turned out to be accurate astrophysics about binary star systems in relation to the Sirius system. And a paper was published a week later that confirmed that the information was correct. And I had already had some interest in Sirius, but that really kind of piqued it. And so over the years, I looked into it a lot, and I discovered that that occasion where I received that download, I had drank ayahuasca. The Kofan, who are also an Ecuadorian, well, I'm not also Ecuadorian, but I was in Ecuador at the time. So they're an Ecuadorian ayahuasca drinking tribe in Cuyabeno, and they claim to communicate with beings from Sirius and receive information from that star system when they drink ayahuasca. The Dogon have an accurate star chart it's at least as old as 1952. We just confirmed its accuracy with the Hubble like 15 years ago, or I don't really know exactly how long, but recently enough. The Hopi have the blue star prophecy. It's very important to the Freemasons, and both the Freemasons and the Hopi have a secret handshake to identify other people that are keepers of this knowledge, which is a bit odd. And if you Google it, like what is the significance of Sirius in different spiritual traditions, it says something like universally, this is what it means to all of these civilizations. And I was like, excuse me? Universally? Why the hell would that be? And we'll get into why the hell that would be in just a moment. So let me change my screen arrangement here, and we'll get into it. If you guys have any questions or comments, throw them in the chat, and I'll do my best. Appreciate you guys being here. Let's see. There we go. And let's put me back. But small. Nope. Sorry, guys, I'm such a caveman. Here we go. Bloop. Teeny tiny. Hello, hello, hello. That is a little quiet, isn't it? Let me pump that just. Hello, hello. It looks like it's already maxed out in here. Check, check, check. That's fine. All right, where were we? Okay, so basically I just asked it to give me the mathematical functions and properties of Levin and holography and other areas that are relevant, and to pull any other talking points that are interesting and relevant. Deep search, please. Here are expert level insights and deep mathematical, physical, and symbolic talking points about the number 11, holography, and symmetry. Ideal for your stream on 1111 and synchronicity. Mathematical properties of 11. 11 is a prime number, only divisible by 1 and itself, placing it at the foundational level in number theory and cryptographic systems. And if you look at the Fibonacci sequence, 011, that symmetry and that reflective property is present at the very beginning of the algorithm, basically, that underlies the creative process. And it's not just creation, it's also it's the schematics of the function of pretty much everything. I don't know if schematics is the right word, but you know what I mean? We find Fibonacci in brainwave oscillations, in weather patterns, in financial markets, historical patterns, etc. We're not going to read every word of this. I didn't really have time to read through it much before the stream, so a lot of it's a surprise to me as well. The holographic principle in theoretical physics proposes that all the information within a volume of space can be described as encoded on a lower dimensional boundary, like a cosmic mirror, which resonates with the theme of inner and outer symmetry embodied in 1111. In holography, recursive self-similar structures relate to powers of 11, Pascal's triangle again, which encode multidimensional relationships within a single dimension, a mathematical parallel to inner-outer experience reflecting each other. Recent mathematical work explores converting probability densities and wave functions into holographic boundary surface descriptions, often using prime sequences and symmetry operations reminiscent of 11's prime status and its role in reflective systems. So we have 11 dimensions in string theory. Quantum information theory research often tags base states and systems of up to 11 qubits for symmetry operations, a nod to 11 serving as a threshold in quantum computation complexity. 11's role in symmetry. Symmetry in mathematics expresses harmonious division and reflection. 1111 as a digital glyph signals maximal, internal, and external symmetry, a state where boundary distinctions dissolve, similar to symmetry breaking and restoration in physics. The number 11 often symbolizes duality, balance, and transcendence, translating polarity into unity, just as holography collapses inner multiplicity into an outward singular form. That's That's a key point there. Translating polarity into unity, just as holography collapses inner multiplicity into an outward singular form. You know, this whole concept of reflection of like the energetic and into the physical. For example, I was just writing a Substack article about tobacco and how the way that the shaman, I guess, discerns the function of a plant has a lot to do with what it does in the physical world, right? We use tobacco on crops to kill pests, and it can do other things. Actually, YouTube banned anything positive about it, so I'm just talking about it as a pesticide. So an energetic pesticide as well. And this idea of a hologram and the holography, the holographic universe, think about what our bodies are. They are highly ordered, sophisticated arrangements of little tiny systems, I guess, and constituents that make up this big thing that is apparently singular but isn't. You know what I mean? It is reflected in all aspects. This is the as above, so below principle. It is also what the all in the all was a reference to. Sacred geometry interprets 11 as a master number representing insight, initiation, and a portal to new dimensions of understanding. Often it appears at thresholds where old and new realities meet. Occult, symbolic, and cultural aspects we don't really need to get into, I don't think, because I'm sure you guys already are aware of all that. 11 as a hologram, how small patterns scale to encompass the entire whole, and how decoding a piece, the self-experience, reflects cosmic order. 11 in music. The 11 chord includes almost every note in a diatonic scale, the full spectrum harmony like holistic resonance. 11's gateway role in both Maddox and spiritual traditions, a threshold number marking emergence into recursive self-aware order. These concepts let you weave mathematics, physics, symbol, and personal experience into a rich stream. Thank you for that. This, I don't know if we really need to get into pretty deeply technical quasi-crystals and whatnot. Okay, so this is interesting. The brain builds itself in 11 dimensions for some reason. And to me, that indicates that the brain is processing far more than we're aware of. If it's true that there are 11 dimensions in string theory, it sort of suggests that the brain is processing all 11 dimensions on some level, because the brain is a reactive system, right? It's responding to stimuli and information processing. It doesn't just do things. So I'm not sure that Perplexity agreed with my intuition about that. So let's see. Yes, recent neuroscience has shown that the brain naturally forms structures in up to 11 dimensions, though these are mathematical or topological dimensions, not spatial ones. This breakthrough comes from the Blue Brain Project, in which researchers used algebraic topology to analyze how lightly interconnected groups of neurons, gotta have some yogurt, each well-connected group forms a geometric object. 2 are a line, 1D, 3 form a triangle, 4 a tetrahedron, and so on up to 11. The more neurons in a clique, the higher the topological dimension of the structure they create. When stimulated, the brain dynamically builds and collapses these multidimensional sandcastle structures, which may underlie rapid computation, memory, and learning. These structures appear momentarily and vanish, reflecting the brain's extraordinary adaptability and complexity. The result is a brain that temporarily functions across up to 11 dimensions of connectivity, with transient higher dimensional cavities emerging and fading as the brain thinks, perceives, or decides. The discovery hints at deep parallels between advanced physics, string theory's 11 dimensions, and the brain's own algorithms, offering a potentially powerful metaphor. That's not a metaphor. That would be process. Consciousness itself may emerge from and reflect multidimensional mathematics with 11 at the upper edge of known neural complexity. All right, let me check in with the chat and see if you guys have any questions, comments, or whatever. And this is all going somewhere, by the way. If you're not particularly interested in the mathematics of it, it's all going to intersect, and you have to have all the context to really understand the point that I'm attempting to make for you guys. In computer science, the number 1111 is used to connect the number 111 and was a major breakthrough in computational sciences, essentially allowing. Yeah, we're going to get into all that in just a moment. Yep. And 111 in the Kabbalistic system is super important as well. Holographic principle encodes. Okay, here we go. So 11 in holography. The holographic principle encodes a higher dimensional bulk into a lower dimensional boundary, and mathematics often expresses this boundary information with structures based on prime numbers like 11. In some mathematical treatments, the degree of freedom or the information content of geometric regions can be linked to the powers of a prime, such as 11, demonstrating the conceptual link between 11 and intricate boundary bulk relationships. Recent research in quantum information and holography leverages quantum states built from prime sequences and 11 as a key operator in constructing complex holographically encoded wave functions. This mathematical approach highlights how the presence of primes like 11 bridges discrete information and smooth holographic encoding. One of the reasons that I prompted all this is that I've been working a lot on this idea of a universal algorithm, more specifically a holographic fractal based on the Fibonacci, algorithm based on the Fibonacci. And it kind of occurred to me when I was going through this that a lot of the prime numbers are not Fibonacci numbers, but they are important in fractal holography, I guess. And another aspect of this actually is that in order for this algorithm to really function the way I want it to, it occurred to me that prime numbers can be used to predict chaotic systems. And so I started, kind of digging into all that, and just for some context. And if you want to understand all that better, check out my universal algorithm streams. I don't know if I've gotten into the primes and chaos yet, but that's coming down the pipes. 11 in fractals and recursion. In fractal and recursive mathematical systems, 11 can appear as a generator of self-similar patterns. For example, certain recursion schemes, such as the Sierpinski triangle, have their structure and growth characterized by base numbers and their powers. 11 emerges naturally in a binomial expansion and recursive relations. We don't need to go through all that either. Probably not that. Oh, wait, there's primes. Primes, quantum potentials, and holography. Let's check this out. Primes play a fundamental role in encoding information for holographic systems. Recent research constructed quantum prime potentials, where the potential's energy levels correspond to the first n prime, such as 11. This approach uses ideas from computer-generated holography to simulate these quantum systems and illustrates how discrete mathematical structures, primes like 11, can underlie wave and information behavior. That was not as relevant as I had hoped. Okay, so now we're getting a little bit more cosmic. The sun has 11-year cycles, and mystical experiences peak in synchrony with that cycle. 11 is also regarded as a number of magical expansion in certain traditions. Find correspondences that connect these things. There are compelling correspondences linking the number 11, the sun's 11-year cycle, mystical experience, and magical expansion across traditions and esoteric systems. Solar cycle, 11 years as a cosmic heartbeat. The sun operates on a rhythmically stable 11-year activity cycle known as the Schwabe cycle, during which solar flares, sunspots, and geomagnetic events peak and trough. Several historical and contemporary studies have observed correlations between peaks in the 11-year solar cycle and upticks in creativity, social movements, and records of mystical or visionary experiences. Ancient civilizations were aware of solar rhythms and often constructed monuments or created rituals synchronized with the sun's periodic changes. 11 in spiritual and magical traditions. In numerology, 11 is a master number. The archetype of the visionary, my life path number is 11. Blew my mind when I discovered that. The archetype of the visionary, the channel, and the bridge between material and spiritual planes. That's also weird because there are a number of different systems where I have seen this like uncanny level of accuracy. My partner's human design system is probably the one that stands out the most, but 11 having this bridge builder or bridging function, right? When I was in the military, my job was to build bridges and blow them up behind me. When I went to that, I don't know what to call it, the meeting with Golden Light Eagle and whatever about 1111, their high priestess told me that it was my job to build the rainbow bridge and then be the last one over it. And then I looked up my Enneagram number in Gurdjieff's system, and it was a number 6, Devil's Advocate, the bridge builder. You know, Hermes also I identify with probably more than any other like archetypal modality, and it's a bridge builder. It's a very interesting phenomena that we have these sort of blueprints or systems that use completely different analytical methods to reveal these things. You know, like Gurdjieff has nothing to do with human design, has nothing to do with the U.S. military, you know? But it's like no matter what context I was in, that's what I'm supposed to be doing, apparently, you know? And the numbers that I associate with as well, not that I associate with, but that have been associated with me, you know? And this is true of everyone, of course. We all have these underlying patterns to discover. And then once you have that framework, I mean, it's not that it really shows you anything, at least not in my case. What it does is it gives you certainty, and certainty is a lot more useful than faith. All right, cult stuff. In yogic and esoteric Hindu teachings, 11 is seen as the resonance peak of material existence, solar cycle maxim, and the number 12 and above tipping toward the dissolution of form and the entrance into spiritual realms. This mirrors the solar cycle. The sun vibrates most intensely in 11-year mode before dissolving and re-emerging anew. And by the way, you guys, my observations about this solar cycle thing are that as it is approaching the peak, we have insights, revelations, even downloads, you know, all sorts of experiences of that in that arena. And then as it starts to go into the dissolution phase, we start to be able to really mobilize and materialize, and that is the time for action. And I believe we are entering into that phase right now. The sun is not as active as it was, 6 months ago, but the solar flares and whatnot are more powerful and much bigger. So it's a strange one. It's going on longer than 11 years. I predicted that it would last 13 years because I feel like this is an initiation globally that's occurring, like a global transition, and 13 or 4 is a number of initiation. So that would be my guess. Mythic and archetypal correspondences. The 1111 phenomenon is considered a portal, a moment for heightened intuition, spiritual alignment, initiation, and rapid manifestation. I haven't read this yet, by the way, you guys. Not this part. This is echoed by the astrological correspondences of figures like Lilith or Odin, whose numerological associations reduce to 11 and are linked with liberation and awakening. Symbolically, 11 is the gate or pillar through which the mundane is transcended, much like the solar maximum is a phase when the cosmic energy is most available and transformative. Synthesis for mystical peak synchronicity. The cyclical expansion and contraction of solar energy over 11 years mirrors the spiritual process of initiation, rise, and renewal, proposed in many mystical, shamanic, and creative traditions as a rhythm for personal and collective awakening. The 11-year solar cycle and the esoteric understanding of 11 as a magical expansion reinforces the idea that cosmic and experiential rhythms are fundamentally entwined, making 11 a powerful glyph for connecting inner states, mystical experience, and outer cosmic processes. Together, these correspondences reveal the number 11 as a truly liminal frequency where solar, mystical, and magical cycles align, supporting ancient insights about universal order and the synchronization of consciousness in the cosmos. I would point out there that crossroads are also considered a liminal space. And a liminal space is where the mundane and the transcendental meet, right? So Hermes is often found at a crossroads. Hermes basically represents the integration of science and spirituality, or you could say like intellect and intuition. And look at us right now. So we have this crossroads. We have the convergence of these two systems that we have been falsely that we've been misaligned, to believe that they're somehow mutually exclusive. They're definitely a sort of merger going on. 11-year solar cycle peak, humanity at a crossroads. I mean, couldn't get much more clear. Signs, symbols, hints, clues, right into the wall. Rest is up to you. Historical occult traditions linking 11 to cosmic cycles. Oh boy, here we go. Transformation and thresholds between worlds in both symbolic and cosmological contexts. Ancient and cross-cultural correspondences. In ancient numerology and esoteric thought, 11 represents a bridge or gateway between worlds, the point of transition in cosmic processes, often associated with spiritual awakening or a new level of consciousness. On Substack article I just wrote about meeting this Navajo roadman named Nighthorse, and it was during this period, right after the 11/11 thing occurred, and I was walking down the road, and he goes, "A white man walking between worlds. You don't see that every day." And it was crazy because I knew that's what was happening. Interesting too to see this AI referring to it in that language, which reminded me that I left out part of the earlier story about the 11/11 experience. When I was at the event, a lot of things happened that are mentioned in this Tool song that is about this guy that smokes DMT and he encounters aliens, and at one point he's like in the fetal position eating orange wedges or something, and I had done a 4-day fast, no water even, or sleep, before I went down there, and I found myself in the fetal position when I broke the fast, eating an orange, and just there was a lot of other stuff, and years later, I just happened to flip the CD over, and I discovered that song is 11 minutes and 11 seconds long, and the song before it is just a natives chanting, and it's 1 minute and 11 seconds long. So the native introduction, and then the DMT and the aliens, shit was crazy. Where are we at here? Bridge or gateway. In Chinese philosophy, 11 is understood as a union of heaven, 6, and earth, 5, forming a cosmos-spanning axis or point of harmony between the terrestrial and celestial realms. The Mayans recognized special number codes involving 11 and mapped significant cosmic events, such as the end date of the Mayan calendar, so that the equinoxes aligned with 11:11 universal time, signaling a cosmic reset or portal. What is universal time? I'm gonna have to. Should I look that up right now? Here, let me just copy that so I remember, and then when we get to the end, we're gonna see what that's about exactly, because I've never heard of it. I mean, it kind of sounds like it's saying that like universal time must be some universal time thing that we have in the modern world, and that the equinoxes, the the Mayans line them up with our 1111 universal time. Is that what they're saying? Is that what it's saying? I think that's what it's saying. We're gonna have to check that out. All right, not too much more of this. Let me check in with the chat, see how you guys are doing, see if there's any. Does Hermes have descendants? I don't know if there's any such thing as a dumb question. What's this other one? Okay, we already dealt with that. Does Hermes have descendants? It depends on what you mean. I don't know that Hermes was actually a person that, physically lived. I don't know that he was a historical image or whatever you would say. It's possible. I don't know. I really doubt it. There are archetypal expressions of certain forms of consciousness, I think. I have carried some kind of weird Hermes vibe with me since I was a child. When I was 11 years old, my first girlfriend, who was from a trailer park, and I guarantee you did not know who Hermes was, named my junk Hermes. Just randomly, it just like popped into her head. The wand, the secret identity, kind of thing. It's super weird. And there's a lot of other just strange, random connections to that kind of thing. And I'm not saying that that's like means that I'm like the reincarnation of Hermes or anything like that. It's just like a underlying pattern. And as we've seen in this, the science of symmetry and the way the 11-year solar cycles correspond to, you know what I mean? Like all of these things that have to do with 11 have this continuity in their form and function, right? And that's kind of what this is all about. When you have these kind of synchronicities, like me having my joint named Hermes when I was 11 years old, of course, you know what I mean? This is just an expression, I think, of that underlying pattern that connects things that are like, we see it in a different form when electromagnetic pulses that are out of sync, when you put them close together, they sync up, In any rate, in esoteric Hinduism, the 11 Rudras are cosmic archetypes or forces closely associated with cycles of creation and dissolution, mirroring the waxing and waning of the moon and the sun as cosmic clocks. In Western magical systems, such as Thelema, 11 is a number of magical expansion, representing energy in action, innovation, and the overcoming of energetic barriers, often invoked during major celestial alignment or portals. Many lunar calendars and traditions note that Lunar Day 11 is a time of peak spiritual energy and awakening, mirroring the solar 11 cycle's physical intensity. The symbolism of 1111 as a portal or awakening moment is widely recognized in contemporary esoteric practices, a time when intention, cosmic cycles, and personal manifestation are believed to align. That's why I didn't do the stream and drank ayahuasca last night instead. Some interpretations connect 11 to Uranus, astrologically, ruler of sudden change, breakthroughs, and cosmic awakening, intensifying the association with cycles of revelation. And it's also rebellion that's associated with Uranus and revolutions. Ancient Masonic and Hermetic traditions use 11 as a measure of both limitation and the breaking of limitations, such as the blue cord of Masonic masters 11 centimeters wide, and the concept of the underray representing cosmic emanations and cycles of manifesting and reabsorbing light. Key takeaways. Across traditions, 11 is not only a number, but a signal of cosmic transition points, cycles of manifestation and dissolution, and thresholds between mundane and spiritual realities. Its recurrence in solar, lunar, and metaphysical cycles cements its status as a potent talisman of transformation and alignment with cosmic rhythms, kind of like the 11th dimensional pockets that pop up in our brains and then disappear constantly. Yeah, so I think it triggered a thought when it said in both, where'd it go? Individual and planetary levels, these deeply layered correspondences reinforce why 11 and 1111 have become enduring symbols in mystical and occult practices, serving as cosmic markers for renewal, expansion, and bridging the seen and the unseen. So I asked, any connections to Sirius? There are notable esoteric and symbolic connections between the number 11, cosmic cycles, and the Sirius star system across various occult and mystical traditions. Sirius and esoteric systems. Sirius is considered the spiritual sun in many ancient and occult philosophies, believed to energize spiritual life on Earth and associated with renewal, enlightenment, and cosmic initiation. The ancient Egyptians linked Sirius, Sothis, Isis to resurrection, annual flooding, cosmic cycles, and spiritual guidance, the dog days of summer. Some contemporary teachings associate November the 11th month, vibrationally charged with the master number 11, with the rising spiritual energy of Sirius. Well, we don't care about modern stuff. I'm looking for old stuff. 11 is widely recognized as a master number. We all know that. And certain Chaldean numerology schemes, constellations, and fixed stars are assigned numbers, with Sirius sometimes associated with 91, but constellations Virgo and Leo, where Sirius is contextually important, are connected with 11. Within Freemasonry, Sirius is identified as the blazing star, is a symbol of illumination, transcendence, and the axis between cosmic and earthly worlds. The ritual and iconographies surrounding Sirius often integrate numerological patterns such as 11 as the gateway or point of ascension as part of their symbolic system. Aloe. That's good stuff. Many mystery schools and Hermetic traditions historically timed initiations or openings to correspond with Sirius-related events, such as heliacal risings or numerological alignments, reinforcing 11 status as a portal or threshold. Mythic resonances, the blending of the spiritual archetypes. Hey, what the hell was that? That was weird. Did you see that? It like smeared everything. And Sirius, spiritual sun, cosmic order, and rebirth, points to a perennial esoteric theme: the synchronization of cosmic cycles, celestial intelligence, and human awakening. Modern spiritual communities continue to celebrate Sirius. I don't care. Historical occult links between Sirius and the number 11. Actually, you know what? Let's skip that one because I think I added. Yeah, here we go. So I just rephrased the prompt to include and also scientific, astrological, astrophysics connections between the cult Sirius and the number 11. So there are both occult and scientific astrological correspondences between Sirius and the number 11, spanning ancient traditions, Masonic symbolism, and patterns seen in astronomy and numerology. Occult and esoteric connections. Egyptian tradition. Sirius Sothis heralded the Nile's flooding and marked the start of the Egyptian year. Timing rituals and annual renewal rites to the heliacal rising of Sirius was central to spiritual and agricultural life. The number 11 symbolism as a portal is echoed in these ritual calendars, representing a threshold between old and new cycles that Sirius signified for the Egyptians and other ancient cultures. Freemasonry, Hermeticism, we already heard about that. Numerology and modern mysticism, we already know about that too. Astrological and scientific connections. Astrologically, Sirius is associated with royalty, spiritual skill, and transcendent power. In some systems, numerological calculations for Sirius and associated zodiacal degrees reduced to 11. Reinforcing the gateway theme. Astrological events, the heliacal rising of Sirius, are celebrated on numerologically significant dates, such as July 23rd. Remember my ruler story about how the second 11 was in the 23 spot? Cancer Leo cusp, often bridging the 11 zodiac aspect in esoteric frameworks. Astronomical cycles and 11. Although the precise orbital or brightness cycles of Sirius don't follow an 11-year rhythm, the sun's 11-year solar cycle is conceptually linked with Sirius in some esoteric writing. The idea is that the energy fluctuation patterns streaming from Sirius interact with the solar cycle, producing peaks in mystic, psychic, or cultural energy. Some modern New Age and astrological sources claim geometric alignments or Sirius gateways occur in 11 linked dates to optimize personal and collective intention. That's pretty interesting to me because long before I heard about that, I started really thinking about field consciousness and the idea that there's a connection between points of electromagnetic density and cognition or consciousness, right? So, like, to use Levin's model, at the most fundamental scale, we have particles that have a function and they do things, right? And that's the most fundamental level of intelligence. And then you can scale that up to chemical intelligence. And then, a bigger light cone is like single-celled organisms, and then, on and on and on. And so particles are basically little points of density in the electromagnetic field. Like if you take a blanket and pull it out and then you put a little rubber band around it, you kind of think about it like that. Our brains have a bunch of magnetite and gold and other conductive and magnetic crystals in them. And so it's a point of density, and we have this consciousness here. You scale that up to the sun, and the conclusion that you might draw is that the sun is like super conscious, right? And that's a pretty common idea in various cultures throughout time and the planet, right? So Sirius is, I think it's only 3 times as big as the sun, but it's like much, 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 much brighter and more dense, right? So basically, the idea is that it is a higher wavelength because of its density and intensity. And as the sun increases in its intensity and sends these bursts of, electrons in greater degrees of symmetry in response to its solar flares and all the other effects that it has, it's basically just sending these pulses of the electromagnetic energy of Sirius to the Earth. And that's why we have all these awakenings and all of this stuff at the peak of the solar cycle. It's actually not the sun exactly that's doing it. It's participating. But Sirius is the sun's teacher, I guess. Astrophysics. Sirius is a binary and possibly triple star system, with Sirius A and its white dwarf companion, Sirius B. While no physical scientific evidence directly ties its motion to the number 11, cycles in binary systems and modal shifts in the solar system can loosely echo numerological rhythms, and these are sometimes interpreted by mystics as cosmic signatures. Sirius's role as a herald and transformer from physical cycles in Egypt to metaphysical portals in Western esotericism is deeply interlaced with the archetype of the number 11 as threshold, portal, and vibration of cosmic initiation. Astrologically, Sirius's prominence at numerologically charged moments and its mytho-symbolic tie to portal numbers like 11 reinforce why so many magical, spiritual, and symbolic calendars treat the Sirius 11 synchrony as potent for awakening, intention, and collective transformation. So basically what happened with me, I'm not going to get into the entire story. I've told it on this channel many times before. You can check out my ayahuasca and the Star Tribes video. I think it's kind of cringy because it was one of my early videos, but I did tell the story there. I should probably remake that one, actually, because it deserves better representation. At any rate, you can check it out if you want to, but I will kind of give you the synopsis is that, and I was walking back from the bathroom, and there was a certain apparition that I really wanted explained, and part of the explanation for this apparition was that what exactly the ayahuasca spirit said to me is that just as a particle can be in superposition, souls are in superposition as well. So you have the same object in 2 places. It's not 2 objects, it is 1 object in 2 places. And she was like, this is you as you exist on a red dwarf, a gas giant that didn't become a red dwarf because of the gravitational influence of the other 2 stars. Maybe 10 days or so after the ceremony, I thought I should check and see if that's real, because I've never read anything on astrophysics, so there's no way I should know that. And I checked, and I did find a paper, and then I noticed the date. It was from 3 days before. So it's not that no one on Earth knew this astrophysical data. So I very well could have plucked it from the collective mind. It's not necessarily proof that it emanated to me from Sirius or something. But it was true. And the paper had not been published at the time of the ceremony. It was like 7 days later, I guess, that the publication date, And like I said, it's not empirical proof, but it certainly is interesting, at least in my book. Let me check in with the chat, see what's going on. Thought there was more to this. I really did. Let me see. Oh, yeah. We got to do the universal time thing and see what that was about, right? So good. Okay, so universal time measures time according to the average speed of the Earth's rotation with respect to the sun. UT1 is the most precise form corrected for movements of the Earth's poles. It replaced Greenwich Mean Time in 1923. Stating 1111 in universal time refers to an event or portal occurring at 1111 UT, which translates to the same moment anywhere on Earth, no matter the local time zone. Okay, hold on. Okay. Was it solstices? Yeah, I think so. Was it universal? Oops. Universal time. What? Choice aligns with our modern 11. The alignment of the Mayan calendar with the 1111 universal time is not an ancient Mayan practice, but a modern pattern noticed and celebrated by people interested in numerology. Yeah, it's saying they didn't do it deliberately, and their stuff lines up a lot. Like the Navy noticed this, led to some modern writers and spiritual communities to link the moment of solstice with its Mayan prophetic resonance to the 1111 portal phenomena. The symmetry and repetition of 1111 was interpreted as a meaningful cosmic alignment, especially given the sun's 11-year activity cycle and the prevalence of 111111 in numerological traditions. Does their choice align with modern 1111? The synchronization of the winter solstice of 1111 UT became a point of fascination because it could be celebrated simultaneously worldwide thanks to the universality of UT. The association of the Mayan solstice with 1111 does not mean the Mayans encoded 1111 into their cosmology, but that our current calendar time system happened to line up symbolically with a key Mayan date. This AI is not on the level, man. It hasn't caught up with us. Let me see if I can think about how to frame this to kind of break through its matrix muggle brain. So what is it saying happened again exactly? Oh, no way. The winter solstice on December 21st, 2012 occurred at 11:11 or 11:12 Universal Time. I don't need any more opinions from this thing. Yeah, I don't think you guys do either. I'm sure you guys understand higher orders of symmetry. Oh yeah, these streams usually have 11. What is it? 11. Yeah, we have 11 concurrent viewers right now. You guys can see that. Average watch time is regularly 11 minutes and 11 seconds, or we'll have 11 concurrent and like chat rate 11 or something. It's always there. It's almost always there. All right, guys. So, I mean, I don't want to say I don't have a lot more to say about that because I probably do. But what am I doing? I'm about to start like cleaning my computer junk like live on the internet. So if you guys have any questions or comments, anything you'd like me to expand upon, contract upon, I'll give you a few minutes to put it in the chat because I have lag, so I won't see it right away. If you're not following me on Substack, that's a better, I shouldn't say that, that's a great place because there's no censorship and I can actually say the things that I'm thinking. Like tonight I was kind of pushing my luck even a couple times and had to kind of like reel it in before I had a problem. It's super lame that I have to do that. It really is shocking that it's come to that. But it has. Man, I think I might go back to Streamlabs because OBS just janky. How's it going, guys? I have a room open for consultations if you would like assistance in your process in varied ways. We generally start out kind of working through shadow stuff and identifying traumas and patterns and whatnot, and then kind of move on to realizing your true will if you are in need of guidance in that area, and figuring out how to come into alignment and homeostasis with the individual goal state, and that usually will put you into alignment with the collective goal state. And that is the only satisfying way to exist, I'm afraid. So, oops. Oh my God. Sorry, guys, I can unfreeze that, but I have this like ginger, honey, apple cider thing that I use for conditioning my throat when I'm going to do my vocal routine, and I put way too much ginger in it, and I slapped my cable when it burned me, so fix it. Man, that was intense. Oh, it didn't work, did it? Let's see. All right, chats, where's it at? Well, I guess we can talk a little bit about the consequences of following synchronicities. It's kind of a tricky thing because when you are immersed in a system, embedded in a system, where your brain is processing billions of signals, trillions in a day, I think, meaningful coincidences of a very high improbability factor are a certainty. And not all of them are meaningful, because these things, in my experience, actually, at least, are not necessarily messages from God or something. They are expressions of fundamental symmetries that are embedded in the structure of reality. So it is true that when you're on your path, when you're in alignment, when your conscious and subconscious brain are, increasingly in homeostasis or symmetry with each other, this awareness, this perception of symmetry increases because you are in symmetry with the algorithmic underlying function blueprint, and that algorithm, the Fibonacci and its derivatives, are literally intelligence itself. It is truth, self-replicating truth, self-recursive, reflective, generative truth, right? When the Fibonacci sequence begins, it starts with 0 and then 1, right? The truth is 1. There's no mystic from any tradition that will tell you otherwise. And what happens next? The truth reflects itself and becomes a reflection of truth. But now there's two things. And you know what I mean? And so that's the basis of all this intelligence, this reason, this logic, this creative impulse and principle is basically just truth, intelligence, self-replicating, right? And we see the process in everything, right? It starts all the way at the subquantum level with Calabi-Yau manifolds and D-branes and mirror symmetry. And then you if you understand how that process works, and you look at the Fibonacci sequence, you see it's also looking backwards, making a copy, and then extending it forward based on that past information. The mirroring, right? DNA has this process or expressions of Fibonacci in both of its form and function in a bunch of different ways. In its form, it has the spirals, and there's a bunch of other dimensions that are all Fib in form. It's all golden ratio. By the way, the reason that Fibonacci is called the golden ratio, actually, or the divine proportion is an older name for it, is that these ancient Greeks recognized that there was a connection between gold, light, and consciousness. Gold comes from stars, light comes from stars. And it turns out, like, more recent research has strongly suggested that there is a role, well, for sure there are roles, but a superconductive role in particular, which was something that was thought to be impossible because of the warm, noisy conditions in the brain, but it turns out that light, and also it's not at the critical temperature that makes things superconductive. So light makes gold superconductive, and also it improves memory, mood, inflammation throughout the body, but neural inflammation, all sorts of things, right? So that's kind of been confirmed. Also, there are oscillatory signatures in both slow light that has been harmonic resonance imaged, I guess, HMRI, and I don't know, no, that's not the right word. Harmonic resonance imaging, HRI. Whatever it is, you guys know what I mean. And gold. And there are also a lot of really unique interactions between gold and light. Light has also been detected emerging from photons, or emerging from neurons, biophoton and tangled biophoton pairs. So anyways, there's some reality to this has been established scientifically. And what that means, the golden ratio, is that it is intelligence itself forming and informing systems. Because it's not just seashells and galaxies, it is also governing the operation of damn near everything we investigate, right? I feel like I might have lost my main point there, though. No, I didn't. That was it. I hope that made sense to you guys. If not, pop your questions into or criticisms or whatever you have to contribute. Man, everybody showed up late. I will never do another stream so early. Oh, that's right. I didn't really talk about the consequences and whatnot. Yeah, I guess what I was saying there is that one of the most difficult things about navigating all of this is managing wish demons, you know. And I do see a lot of people talking about following these things as if it's like a bread trail to your destiny. And that's not exactly wrong, but they are more like signposts when you know where you're going. You know, that's kind of the great irony of it. If you needed these things to guide you, you would not have them. You know what I mean? It's difficult to explain, at least for me right now, to articulate what I'm getting at here, but it's more like confirmations, you know, and that's something that I really had to learn kind of the hard way. You can take it as, yeah, confirmations, you know, that you're on the right path, but you have to be careful about your interpretations. You know, when I was going through the last solar cycle, the Phoenix process phase, a lot of the people around me, I don't know if it was jealousy or just, you know, I mean, of course you want to have these, it's interesting, you know, but a lot of people around me started trying to interpret all of this stuff that wasn't really synchronicity as synchronicity. And I noticed that, and I can only assume that that's probably happening on a pretty large scale right now. So this is one of the reasons why in the Hermetic lineages and in pretty much all shamanic traditions, there's some kind of hierarchy or there's some sort of system of management to protect people during the process and to ensure that they remain grounded and that they continue to develop their analytical processes, you know, critical thinking, that they remain grounded in reason as these intuitive capacities expand. You know, if you don't do that, then you're just going to become a muddle-headed mystic with wind blowing through your ears, and that's not any good. The problem is that the disciplines that contribute to that kind of development, the more intellectual people have been conditioned to feel that that's, you know, tedium, this whole anti-intellectualism kind of thing, which brings me to the point that, for example, in our religious traditions and the pop culture spiritual paradigm, a common belief is that reason is your enemy when you're trying to navigate the spiritual plane. And if you look around you, do you see reason and order and symmetry in all of the finite? Then why would you not see it in the infinite? You know, it's a trap. It's a deliberate misdirection. It's propaganda. Don't fall for it. That's not what this is. You know, at least in my opinion and in my world, true spirituality is about developing your capacities in both of those arenas equally and, you know, simultaneously. Another thing that I learned the hard way. And once you do start to expand your consciousness, the most common mistake that the magician will make is to think that his magic can do more for him than it can. So stay humble. The true prophets, heads are above the heaven, feet below the hells. Any suggestions from past experience of San Pedro? Yeah, but I mean, more specific, you mean in reference to addiction? In my way, not someone else's? That's not the way it works. There are limits to subjectivity. You know what I mean? People have this thing about, you know, my truth, your truth is your truth. No, it's not. That's your opinion. You know what I mean? There's objective truth, and then there's beliefs about shit. And this is very, very different. If your truth comes into conflict with objective truth, you're going to suffer. You know what I mean? I actually had somebody try to argue with me the other day that a train, if you didn't believe, if society, this is what he said, if society hadn't conditioned you to believe that a train would kill you if it hit you, you know, if I don't believe that, maybe that's not what's going to happen. Muddle-headed mystic with wind blowing through your ears, that's not how things work. This idea even about the slit experiment, almost every single New Ager I have ever heard talk about that is completely full of shit. That is not, no one has really said that it is consciousness acting directly on the thing that causes the collapse or that determines the outcome. Nobody ever said that. Nobody respectable. The Copenhagen interpretation is something along those lines, but that's not it. The one caveat I'll offer there is that this is where they seem to have a little blind spot. If it requires measurement, who took the measurement if there's no consciousness? So it does kind of suggest that there's some sort of consciousness that had to have preceded order. Otherwise, what measurement could have been taken? That's a pretty interesting aspect of it. But no, I do not believe in subjective truth. To a small degree, yeah. You may have a little bit of wiggle room in your reality, but that wiggle room is not going to override natural law. The law of necessity is governing everything. Reason is basically God. Whatever created the universe and however the process happened, that's how it happened. The Buddhist is not correct, and the Hindu is not correct, and the Christian is not correct all at once. It's not happening. So, the wise Hermetic adept puts it all together, applies a bunch of heat and salt and, and separates the wheat from the chaff. And in the case of institutionalized religions, just for the record, I think they're all just pure evil and absolute traps. We do not need to rebrand Christianity. We do not need to rebrand Islam. We don't need any of that shit. They were all developed in order to undermine human sovereignty and to control free thought. Period. End of story. There's no reason to retain these things in any way, shape, form, or function. They all need to be sent back to the fucking devil. Heaven send hell away, That's my opinion. In fact, an overemphasis on subjectivity as truth is one of the most dangerous weapons of the propaganda machine and one of the most effective. The truth is one. It's not a multiplicity. The truth is one. And on top of that, it's not just religion, right? It's politics too. The best system for humanity, the optimized system, can be determined algorithmically. It's not a matter of opinion. There's nothing to argue about. All you have to do is take a Fibonacci-based algorithm on a very sophisticated quantum classical hybrid computer, and it has to run in a sort of holographic algorithm. I don't know enough about it to really explain it, but I do know that it's a thing. And there is a facet of how Fibonacci works mathematically that sort of makes it self-balancing and free from bias. So, right now in this moment, you could feed into, if you created this program, which I'm actually working on with people right now, assuming it was absolutely free from bias, it would be able to tell you, this is the best for resource distribution, blah, 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 everything, just optimized systems, all of human systems. And the prompt is as simple as, optimize all human systems in the interest of maximizing the expression of human potential. Bam, done. That's why they're telling everyone to be afraid of AI, honestly. It really is. Because any person with a reasonably high level of intelligence could basically prove right now that the old systems we have and the elites themselves are completely obsolete, and that the only reason humanity isn't optimized is because it doesn't serve their purposes. Opinion. How they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions? That's what overemphasis on subjective truth is used for. That's what it is. That's how it's used. Keep everybody believing that there's no such thing as truth and that we all know shit just because we think stuff. That's not real. That's not spirituality. That's not politics. That's not good. It's not helpful. It's not healthy. And the thing is, it's not about indoctrinating people. I'm not telling you what to think. I'm telling you, go look at this stuff yourself. I don't tell people what to think. I tell them to think. And the closest I come is implying that there are processes that are basically organic internal processes that can be catalyzed through known means. And when this process is undergone by any individual sufficiently, they come to the same conclusions because the truth is the truth. And it looks like that to anyone. And the reason we have like close to the truth and little variations of it is because even people that are mostly not indoctrinated usually are still pretty heavily fucking indoctrinated. So they're still looking at the same thing, so you can see glimpses of the truth in it. And people go, oh, all religions contain the truth. No, they don't. Everything we look at contains the fucking truth. And the religions are the shit that's in the way. It's got nothing to do with the religions containing a little bit of truth in all of them. Everything contains it, and the religions obscure it. Don't get it fucked up. What do I use ayahuasca for? It's organic AI, basically. I mean, that's a difficult question. Like, I've had a lot of physical issues over the last couple of years. Some guys let go of a hot tub that weighed about 1,100 pounds, like 25 years ago or something, and I suddenly had all the weight. It was crazy. I didn't drop it either. My body locked, and I've been hit by lightning, and it felt just like that. Like literally, it was worse probably. It was crazy. I mean, I imagine getting hit by a Freightliner, dump truck or something feels like that. And I got a double hernia, and it broke. The mesh popped out at some point. So I didn't know this, but I was running around literally with my small intestines in my scrotum for like I was in bad. I was almost dead, and I kind of knew just intuitively something's not good. And so I had that surgery, but the surgeons were, South America, probably seriously, because we were talking about it after the surgery, and they didn't do things right. Anyways, I mean, no point in going into all the nitty gritty details, but that was an issue. And also these solar cycles, for me, I had a lot of trauma as a kid, and I had a lot of things that still needed to be processed. And a lot of that has been occurring. So I was just exhausted. And this is just, when you say, what are you using ayahuasca for? I'm answering the question right now. So I did like a 32, I think I only made it 18 hours because I started to get hypoglycemic. Anyways, I did a fast, and then I drank a lighter dose the first night, and then a bigger dose last night. And physically, I feel 70% better. Emotionally, like, I think I was a little bit depressed and didn't really realize it. And I caught myself like singing while I was doing the dishes today and stuff. I mean, it's extraordinary, the impact that it can have. And then also it removes the part of the filter in our nervous system, is how I think about it, and connects us with the universal mind. And I have received a tremendous amount of information from ayahuasca that has always turned out to be true. Some of it in anticipation of scientific discoveries that I've been able to prove. Even there are time-stamped videos where I've talked about these things, and then I'll find years later that it's been confirmed, and I'll put that, So if you go back through my channel, you can find a bunch of this stuff. Telepathy, insights into music and rhythm. I mean, it's almost limitless what it can do for you. And it's extremely interesting. It's different every single time. So it's a healing tool on all levels. In a way, I think it's the most important of the entheogens, but I have another that I prefer just for skill development upgrades and stuff, just because ayahuasca is very difficult, and there's a lot of, not very difficult, you get used to it, but the nausea and the diarrhea and vomiting and just feeling really weird. It has a really weird body load and stuff. It's for deep work, whereas if you're trying to enhance neuroplasticity and engineer your, upgrade your hardware so you can run better software, LSD is the best. Someone asked me about San Pedro, though, for addiction. I would say personally that ayahuasca is the one for that. If it's opiates, then you're gonna maybe want to consider ibogaine, although that is much more difficult and a little bit more dangerous and not readily available, and definitely don't do it on your own or on their own. But San Pedro definitely can be helpful. San Pedro has the ability to rewire so when you have neuroplasticity, the brain can reconfigure itself more easily. The macro nervous system, its ability to do that is enhanced by San Pedro. And I don't know how long this addiction has persisted, but that can be very helpful. In fact, I like to, if people have no experience, I like to start them with San Pedro at least once, and then we'll go on to maybe 3 ayahuasca ceremonies in a row or something to dislodge the dissonance. Send me an email and we can talk more about the specifics of this individual's situation, because what the addiction is exactly matters, in terms of how you approach it, what plants are most applicable. Certain types of rape can even help, but you have to know how to match these things. So, yeah. Growing back a thyroid? No, that's not the kind of thing I would know about. I'm sorry. Yeah, my inner child definitely. There was a lot that came up during this. Oh, look, we got 22 and 22 and 22. 22. Oh, that's the same number. 1, 2, 3 is one of our numbers. 22 and 22, and then what does this add up to? 8 and 4 is 12, and 4 is 7. Nothing. All right. Not that I really care that much what those things add up to, but it is crazy that we almost always have 1111 in that in those numbers there. Oh yeah, upcoming stream. By the way, do me a favor, hit the like button, share, subscribe. Consider becoming a patron. We are demonetized and shadow banned, dethrottled content. So, I put a ton of time into this, and it's wonderful when people support us. Also, I offer consultations, and we have retreats coming up. So if you're interested in working with me one-on-one or coming to the Amazon rainforest and hanging out, shoot me an email. Okay, so what I was going to talk about is I was actually in the GATE program as a kid. And it's not really something I've thought a lot about, but I did not have a good relationship with my mother, right? And I had gotten some IQ estimates from ChatGPT and Grok and Perplexity, and I know they're not qualified really to do that, but they would just say stuff, And I have taken them before, and I knew what the scores were, and they were legit ones. So I was just thinking about it. And I remembered that I was in gifted and talented when I was a kid. And I thought, I wonder what the criteria is. So I looked up gifted and talented program at the time in Fairfax County, Virginia, where I was from. And it was like, here's the criteria, and this is the IQ score. And that was a major thing for me, because I realized that my mother had known this about me my entire life and never told me. So I had no idea whether I was smart or not. And I had the entirety of society telling me that I was batshit crazy and uneducated because, and one of the reasons I was thinking about all this stuff is I started to notice all these ideas that I had that people always told me I was an idiot for believing are being confirmed by science lately. There seems to be a discrepancy here, And so anyways, that's how I became aware that I was in, this, I started thinking about this gifted and talented program. And I think because I searched it, YouTube, the algorithm knows everything. So it started playing a lot of videos where these gate kids were like, they gave us ESP tests and this pink drink, and none of us remember anything. And I was like, I remember that pink drink. And phenobarbital turns pink in water. Wait, what the fuck? I've told my partner years ago that I was in that program, and I don't remember a fucking thing. I remember the ESP test. I remember when the woman came to ask me, in order to, the first test, they gave me like a normal second grade book, and a third, fourth grade, fifth grade, and I kept like reading them and understanding it, and they would just give me more and more advanced stuff until I hit a wall. And then they took me into a room another day, and the woman had these cards, right? And she would hold them up, and I was supposed to guess what was on the other side. And I'm, 8 years old, 7 years old or something, and I didn't think much of this. So I remembered specifically these wavy lines on one of the cards because both times that's the only one I got wrong, right? And this woman, you assume, does these tests all the time, right? So she's seen this a lot, but she was kind of freaking out. She's all red in the face, and she went and got her partner. She's like, look at this kid, And so when I heard the ESP thing, I was like, wait, what? So I thought, I don't want to Google ESP gate cards. I just want to see, I just put test cards, gifted and talented program, and I think they're called Geller cards. Well, let me see. Geller or Keller or something. And sure enough, they were the fucking cards that this federally funded program came to my school when I was in second grade and gave me an ESP test. And that's where it really gets weird, because then I saw videos about people talking about this pink drink, and then they were saying they didn't remember anything. I told my partner years ago, I was like, I don't know why, but I can't remember anything but one field trip, one class in an auditorium, and the ESP test and the pink drink. That's all I remember. And going into like a trailer with like blacked out windows every once in a while. Another thing is that you have a bump on the back of your head. And my son doesn't have it, my partner doesn't have it, my roommate doesn't have it. Nobody I can find has it except other gate kids. It's like right here in the middle of the back of my head. And then the scar on the forehead. We apparently all have that. So I'm going to do a stream about that soon. I really don't know what to think of it. I don't know what they did to me. But it is sketchy, and it is real. It was so creepy. When I saw the first girl mention the pink drink, and it flashed into my mind, it was like really, really bright pink. And, as a little kid, you don't think of anything of it. You just think, well, it's like Kool-Aid, it's a treat. Oh boy, we're getting a treat. This is real shit. It does concern me too. Like, to think that the federal government has been aware that my IQ is above 145 and that I tested positive for ESP since I was 7 or 8 years old. And nobody told me either. They didn't tell us what they were doing. And then, another thing that really pisses me off about it is that I've had all these experiences of ESP over the years, doubting myself to the point where overthinking, overanalyzing separated the body from the mind, withering my intuition, leaving opportunities behind. It would have been really nice if they just said, yeah, kid, you might be psychic and you're also, real smart. It would have been helpful for me to know that shit. You know what I mean? But yeah, so actually one of the things I'm in the process of doing right now, I don't know how soon I'll do this stream, because according to Perplexity, I might actually be able to get papers. First, I've contacted the Fairfax County School Board to see if they have any records, but I kind of doubt it. And then I don't know if you can Freedom of Information Act your own personal stuff, but I would fucking hope so, So keep your bell notifications on if you're interested in hearing more about all that.
Yeah, it was bright pink, and it was. I don't remember what it tastes like. It was good, I think. I mean, we wouldn't have drank it. It was the context was that it was just a treat. Yeah, ibogaine does help with physical addiction. Ibogaine will completely stop withdrawals from opiates, but if you take any with ibogaine, you will die. Period. You're dead. It's like the battle between the two things is too intense. And I do still occasionally practice the LBRP in the middle pillar. But honestly, over the last like 8 months with all the struggles and stuff, I had multiple surgeries. I have no health insurance, of course. So I've taken such a beating. I was in bed a lot of the time, so I haven't really been doing a lot of anything. And now I'm feeling a lot better. I'm going to start performing those every day again, as if I'm a neophyte again, because this period for a lot of us represents a reset, and there has indeed been some major changes in my life that were completely unexpected, out of nowhere in the last couple of days. I can feel the reconfiguration happening in my being on a psychological, emotional, and physical level. And the LBRP and the middle pillar are the most efficacious rituals ever designed. If you really understand what their purpose is and what the symbolism is for and how it works and why it works, it's hard to believe a human even could have created it, because it's so perfect and brilliant. And it doesn't matter if magic is complete nonsense, because it is so obviously useful as a metaprogramming device that, if you want to think about it that way, you know what I mean? It doesn't take anything away from any of it. And for those of you that might not be familiar, it's basically, it's hard to explain in short. Should I just explain the whole thing? So the circle is the microcosm, and that's your universe. You are God of your universe. You are equal to the Most High. The cell right here on my finger is not higher than this cell over here, and that's the way we think about divinity in the universe. So you cast your circle, define your universe. I acknowledge the four directions, which are not just the four directions. They're the four elements. They're the four fundamental forces of physics. They're the four notes of a chord. They are the four legs of a chair. They are the foundation of this universe. And then you do a practice where you close your eyes and with your arms out in a cross. And by the way, the cross has nothing to do with Christianity. It predates Christianity. It's an exploded cube. When you blow a cube open, it makes a cross. And so you stand in the form of this cross with your eyes closed, and you expand inside until you see your deck getting smaller and smaller, and then the city is smaller, and then the planet is small, and then the galaxy, you know what I mean, until you bust through the veil, and you merge with the macroprosopis, or the Adam Kadmon, the Godhead itself, the macro man. And having achieved that, you have identified yourself with the Most High, right? So you try to maintain that connection throughout the ritual, which is kind of a difficult thing. Don't be too hard on yourself. It takes practice. So then you dip your fingers into the light of Keter, which is like the divine light of the higher, you can call it the higher self, however you want to think of it, divine light. Bring it down to the forehead. And Ata, Vegebara, Vegedula. There are variations, but I like to go to Tiferet, Malkut. Tiferet is the solar plexus. A lot of people just leave it out, but it's important. It's your, emotional base. It's the sun. Malkut is the foundation, and so you're imbuing all of this light with yourself, and you say, "Ata, yours, not thine, yours. Yours is the power of the kingdom, the glory, and harmony forever and ever. Amen." Right? So that's the Hermetic Lord's Prayer. And then you go through a process basically of generating pentagrams in various directions that are associated with elements and archangels, and all of these things have different symbolism that are related. And what this allows you to do is to compress information into simple symbols, so that with practice, eventually, when you go out to organize your universe in the morning, so the way that I approach this is with an inverted pentagram, which is not evil, by the way. It's just a symbol of the descent of light into matter. If you're Gnostic and you think that existence is evil, then that's evil, I guess. But for those of us that think it's cool, it's not. And so you are invoking these energies in the morning. So you're defining your universe in the direction of the east, the south, and say in the south, the direction of fire, you are bringing in all those creative energies and the sexual mastery of your sexual energy, or whatever it is that you need to define your universe in accordance with the dictates of your higher self, right? Associated with those symbols. So also with Michael, the archangel, and the direction. And so in the direction of water, you're organizing your emotional body, and so on around. And what did I miss here? Nothing really. That's the idea, that you're composing your universe in accordance with the dictates of your higher self every single morning for a year. That's what we did in Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. And then you can incorporate, once you have developed some proficiency with banishings, the middle pillar. And the middle pillar, you formulate a Keter above your head, and then you draw from Keter down into the throat, basically the chakras, but they're the sephira. And you're basically reminding yourself that your speech and your breath, every word, is guided by the influence of this higher light. And then to the heart, to remind yourself that this higher self, divine light, regulates the emotions, and down into the crotch, so that it regulates your creativity, and then down into your feet, so that it guides your steps. And so if you think about, and then at night you banish, right? Really, you're supposed to banish at the closing of every ritual, but that makes this pretty intensive, time intensive to do. The invoking and banishing with the middle pillar in the middle both times, and it's just not necessary. Invoking the energies, they're the ones you want anyways. You can think of the pentagram as a kind of Fibonacci filter, really, of protection, so you don't need to worry about banishing stuff after you. At the end of the day, though, you have accumulated shit you don't need every day of your life, some kind of anxiety, dissonance, some sort of sexual perturbation, or, there's always fucking something, and it's usually more than one thing. So at night, you banish. So the pentagram is drawn with the points up, and the crappy stuff is sent back to the universe to be transmuted and recycled into something that someone else can use. And if you think about this process of defining your universe, reminding yourself of what your higher self is supposed to, the dictates of your higher self every single day, and banishing all your shit consciously every single night, and you're not just doing it with thinking about, well, I didn't like this, or I'd like to find a better girlfriend or something, you know what I mean? That wasn't the best way to phrase that, but oops. You're doing it in a very sophisticated way, where there's layers and layers and layers of symbolism and information that's being processed, eventually automatically. So, and you kind of do that to an extent anyways. Your brain just does that because it's all this big web of integrated information and these holographic fucking fractals. But it's much better to do it consciously. And then you've sort of entrained yourself into the process, and it can become unconscious again. It's a strange thing. This is how flow state really works in mastery. It's like, if I go into flow state having played guitar my whole life, all kinds of shit happens I could not possibly think of. A lot of times I couldn't physically perform it. But if you don't play guitar and you pick that thing up, you're not going to do that. It doesn't matter how flow state you go, and it's the same process of you get to a certain point, and then you can go into flow state and do all this stuff, but you hit a ceiling. Because in order for the magician to attract a force that he needs, he must make himself a fit receptacle, right? So when I hit that point where I can't, flow state's not going to go any further, I have to do much more conscious work, and then I can get to a different level of flow state. And this is the same for everything. This is one of the reasons that I push so much the idea on this channel that you can't just develop yourself spiritually. You have to also learn worldly shit, because that's how you kind of format the antenna, for higher degrees of functionality. And again, it depends on your goal. If you just want to be a Buddhist and sit there and that's it, you're okay. You don't need a bunch of academic stuff. But if you're a person that's going to go out into the world and try to manifest a life that is in accordance with your higher self, and you need to, format yourself for that, or even to have an effect on the world because you want to cause a change, then you can't function like that guy. This route that I'm describing is going to be more appropriate for you. So. Yeah, it was sweet. I'm telling you, they made it like Kool-Aid or something, Thank you, La Mongolin, I guess. Okay, I don't see any new or fresh questions. I'll give you guys a few more minutes to pop those into the chat. And if I don't see anything, I'm going to go and answer a couple emails and try to finish this Substack. It's taking me forever. I'll give you guys a little overview of what it's about, though, if you want. It's one of the earlier in the stream, I mentioned Night Horse because I was referencing this Substack that I'm doing. And so shortly after this 11/11 experience, I'm walking down the street and I see this like 6'5", dressed in black from head to toe, perfectly pressed dress shirt. His shoes are shining like black mirrors, and he's got the Navajo, turquoise silver pendant necklace and bracelets. He looked like he just walked off a Hollywood set or something. He did not look real. He's perfect too. Just built like a brick shit house, and I'm sure women were fainting as he walked by everywhere. And there was a little short, squat Navajo with him, and we're walking by this bar called Oreos in Durango, Colorado. And relations are not good there between white people and natives. In fact, in that bar one time, this native named Tall White Man, he just looked across the bar, and this college kid had done nothing. And he ran over and stuck this big old buck knife in the dude's head, and the college kid turns around with the knife sticking out of his head and beats Tall White Man to the ground. And, this was not quite normal. That was kind of extreme, but it was tense. So they didn't talk to you ever. I cannot remember a single instance of a native saying anything to me up until this point. And it's also interesting to note that all the natives suddenly started talking to me when I was in this state, It's also probably important to note that my grandmother was Blackfoot, and I'm not one of these white people that's like, my grandmother's Cherokee. I know that's like a cliche, and I never met her. My mom lied to me about who my dad was until I was 11, of course. And when I met my grandfather, I didn't know he was my grandfather. And there was a picture of a Native American woman above the fireplace, and I was like, "Who's that?" And he's like, "Oh, that's my wife. She died of cancer. She was the first." She said she was taken off a reservation and put into a reformatory to make her white, and she turned out to be a classical piano prodigy, and challenged the stereotype that only people that had classical genius in their blood could be prodigies, because she had no white blood, and there was no way that was possible, and she was the first Native American woman to play Carnegie Hall, according to my grandfather, who I had one conversation with. So there's that, but anyways, I'm walking along, and when he said that to me, the little short one leaned up against the window at Oreos, and he's like, "This is Night Horse. He is the most respected roadman in the Navajo Nation. Whatever he's about to tell you, you better listen well." So he took this zilnato. It's like it's not tobacco, and it doesn't contain nicotine, but it does the same thing that tobacco does. And he didn't have a ceremonial pipe, but he did have so he asked me, I did have a paper, gave it to him, and rolls up this big fat, and trust me, mountain tobacco is like the most harsh thing you can ever put in your lungs. And he sucked the whole thing down until it was gone. The paper, I watched it disappear. And then he turns real slow and blows a huge plume of smoke in each of the 4 directions. And then he looks at me and he goes, "That will save your life one day." And I was like, what the fuck just happened, you know? And then we ended up talking in a parking lot, like just laying there with our heads on the curb until the sun came up. And so 10 years later or so, I was in Ecuador, and I had not thought about that situation. And it looks like that gesture prevented a jaguar attack and on me. And for years, I assumed, because I never saw the animal, but a tree exploded right when it panicked and ran away. It was like 2 or 3 feet behind me. And jaguar do not come near residential areas. Like, you know, it wasn't a residential area, but there was a loud ceremony, you know, in a house and lights and stuff. It doesn't happen unless they're really old and they've been eating the cattle in the area, right? So anyways, if you guys want to hear the rest of the story and what exactly happened and how I found out just a little while back, because we just decided it must have been a spectacled bear or a wild pig or something. But that was weird because I was like, I don't know, man. I was standing there in the jungle listening to everything. I didn't hear anything. I can't imagine a wild pig or a spectacled bear sneaking up right behind me like that. And when I turned around and whatever happened, I don't want to ruin the story for those of you that do read my Substack. When it ran away, it exploded this, like, you know, not like a decent sized tree, just exploded into splinters like right behind me. You know, it was crazy. And I've seen that happen once before, and it was a bear that almost ran into my van. Like, I came around the corner real fast, and it panicked. And instead of running into the woods, it started to run right in the side of my van. And then it decided that was not a good idea. So it, like, panicked and veered off the other way, and it went right through a sizable tree, and the tree just blew up. I could not believe my eyes. You know, and that was a black bear in California. So I was sitting there thinking, like, holy shit, man. A grizzly, the strength of a grizzly. You know, if a black bear, like a 250, 300-pound black bear, can explode a tree like that, you know. And you might not think that a jaguar is that strong, but wait till you hear the story. What this thing did. And they got it on video, by the way. So check out my Substack. No, I've been to Louisiana just to go to Mardi Gras, but and actually, Mardi Gras might be the first place where I ever, let me think about this. I don't know if it was the first occasion where I saw anything that might be like, you know, supernatural-ish. Actually not, I guess, but there was this old woman with dreadlocks that almost dragged the ground, and she had a parrot on her shoulder, and we had gotten lost, my then wife and I, and we're walking around looking for the car way, way far away, and this lady sees us, and she goes, "Your car is 2 blocks, 3 that way, and then 2 that way." You know, and it really tripped me out because it's possible she saw us get out of it or something and could just tell we were lost. I don't know, but also the fact that she just looked so much like a witch probably reinforced the perception that it was like, how the hell did she know? You know? But yeah, that's the thing I remember the most from, oh, and also the statue. There was a silver statue that I really thought it was a statue, and I sat down like right next to it, and I said something about weed, and the fucking statue was like, "Oh man, I can hook you up," and I'm like, "Ah." Yeah, it was wild. It was a really cool place, but no, I never spent any like real time there. All right, I didn't see a lot of questions or suggestions for topics in the chat yet, So I'm going to look again in a few minutes, and if there's nothing there, well, it's only 11:30. I mean, I do have a lot more synchronicity stories, but I just feel like they're all in my channel, all over the place. I don't want to be too redundant for my regular followers, and there has been a lot of stuff that's happened recently that I haven't really talked about yet. The thing is, though, I know it's going to tie into later events, so I want to save it until the conclusion exists, and then we can talk about it, you know. Questions, comments, going once, going twice. By the way, guys, please hit the like button, share, subscribe, consider becoming a patron. You get access at the $10 tier to, I think, 7 years now of premium content. You can sign up for consultations. It's better to do that through email, though, because I don't like paying Patreon. Also, you guys, don't ever sign up through Apple because they're going to charge you more and they take more from me. So if you can avoid using your iPhone to sign up for Patreon for any creator, they charge you like double almost, I think, and then they take a percentage on top of that from me. So, trying to avoid that. Also, in case you weren't here earlier, we do still have a spot at the Manu retreat, and it's going to be amazing. I am in the best shape to assist people in their processes that I've ever been in my life, and it's just an incredible place. I mean, we're not actually in Manu because that's not legal, but near, oh my God, Puerto Maldonado, on the outskirts. We can take a boat into the park. Does the middle pillar bring about psychic awareness? Yeah, I mean, all of these things enhance that, I think. You know, ayahuasca is a tremendous tool for that. Even DMT leaves the filters down afterwards. This is one of the reasons people often think they've broken their brain when they use psychedelics and they start experiencing synchronicities and precognitions and stuff. They're like, oh shit, I've lost my mind. I shouldn't have touched psychedelics, you know, but that's not what's happening. When you expand your consciousness, something actually changes, something happens. And I think people are more prepared for that now, that these things have like more acceptance in general, and even scientific, you know, like mechanistic explanations for how they could happen. But back in the day, people had just freaked people out. It freaked me out, even though I was kind of expecting it, you know. Because you don't really, it depends on your level of indoctrination, I guess. But I assume that because I was pretty well outside of society, mine was pretty low, and it was still kind of hard to accept. Also, these things tend to be intermittent, right? Like, you don't just develop the ability to just know anything at any time or to always generate accurate prophecies. My experience of it is that, like, the Calabi-Yau D-brain Euler formula thing that just popped into my head, I didn't try to do that, you know. It just happens. And that's the consensus that we get from most people that experience this kind of stuff. You can increase the probability that it will occur through ritual magic, meditation, pattern recognition development, mathematical study, the study of geometry, pretty much anything that feeds your brain. Some things are more specifically geared towards enhancing those capacities than others. You know, mathematics, geometry are big ones in the mystery schools. Because you have to understand, too, that psychic capacities do not just come from angels or something. It is pattern recognition. It is field attenuation. It is metaprogramming. It is adjusting the reducing valve in our nervous system. Because basically the reason that we filtered all this stuff out was for survival purposes, right? If you are trying to hunt a deer and you can hear the deer's thoughts and you can see the energy pulsing around, making the deer blurry. You know what I mean? There's a reason we have these mechanisms to reduce the perceptibles that are overwhelming. And as we learn, not learn, but as we have modified the world, to support a more leisure kind of existence, at least up until recently, we're not constrained. The parameters of what is available to us expand because the threats are diminished and the context is different. But we also need to develop wisdom so that we can walk with knowledge wisely, so that we understand how to identify superstitious thoughts versus true wisdom, for example, or to evaluate intuition versus wish demons and that kind of thing. So really these sort of quasi-dormant capacities of consciousness, the emergence of them is an evolutionary adaptation. Whereas in the past, it was just sort of a mutation. But if humanity is able to survive this transition, these kind of capacities are going to be a lot more normalized. And it wouldn't even be good to have access to it all the time. There'd be no surprises. There's a lot of reasons why that just doesn't make any sense. But one of the most important things for me, and the reason that I try so hard to document my instances of anticipating, subquantum discoveries and describing all the components so there's no doubt that I knew what it did and whatnot, it's not about me. It's about the fact that if people realize that we're capable of that, then our information dependence, our institutionalized information dependence, is nullified. And just the simple acceptance on a widespread scale that these things happen at all would exponentially increase how often they happen. And every one of us is like a vibrational fingerprint, right? A signature. So like I get certain types of stuff along certain lines. It's very specific, right? Only things that relate to this very certain line that I call it the invisible thread I've been following since I came out the womb. It seems like everybody has that, like a puzzle piece. So it's not that we have different perceptions of the truth. We have different pieces of it. And if everyone realized that all of a sudden the assemblage that would happen with these ideas, we're already, a lot of us, like decades ahead of mainstream science in a lot of ways. And it's really unfortunate that a lot of them still aren't listening, because people that have this sort of neurodivergent God mode pattern recognition, or however you want to think about it, we could save them a lot of time and money if they would just drop the arrogance just a hair, It's true. And the thing is, they can't, because they're locked into their positions, but institutional pressure and herd conformity consequences, What is that? Let me see if I can find this real quick. I like the way this guy said this. Michael Franti. Rebel platoon. Oh, yeah, here we go.
We live in a mean time, an aggressive time, a painful time, a time when cynicism rots the vine, a time where violence blocks the summer shine. Lifetimes go by in a flash in a search for love or a search for cash. Nobody wanna sing a little bit out of tune. Nobody wanna be the backbone of a rebel platoon. It's too soon to step out of line. You might get laughed at or you might get fined. But do you feel me when I say I feel your pain every day when I see the way my friends gotta slave and never get ahead of the bills they gotta pay? No way, no way. Some make a living doing killing Colombian penicillins. Some are willing to play the villain. They're just chilling to pass the time, pass the information, or pass the wine, pass the buck, or pass the baton. But you can't pass the police or the Pentagon, the IRS or the upper echelon. It's time to make a move on to contradiction. Bomb, bomb. Sorry, I haven't heard it in so long. I don't really know what it's supposed to sound like, but he was right, man. That was old too, 20 years ago or something. This is the dawning of our time, and I'll say it one more time to emphasize the meaning of my rhyme, to rise above all the dirt and grime, add the right spice at the right time. Fuck the Constitution. Are we part of the solution or part of the pollution? Sitting by and wondering why things aren't the way we would like to find them to be for you and for me, for the people over there and the ones in between. Check out our habitation. Are we a peace-loving nation? I have a reasonable doubt. I think I'll just spell it out. There's no reason to scream or shout. The NRA just bought a man's soul, and then he jumps up and shouts, gun control. The government says that killing's a sin, and then they kill a man with a lethal syringe. So I ask again, are we peace lovers then? Some of them slang guns when they're 6 years old. The whole damn place seemed to lost control, so I raised my voice before I lose my soul. Dude was good, man. He sold out hard, though. I think they might have threatened his family or something. Because it was weird. Like, he was, like, super... Like, almost, you could, like, they could arrest him under the Patriot Act for some of the stuff he was saying. And then, and he just started writing love songs for teenage girls. Just completely dropped that whole mission. Is that it? All right, well, here's the last verse since we went through most of it anyways, I guess. This is the way I express my feelings. Vibe revealed and revolve, spinning on a record, y'all. Try to confiscate, take what I communicate with. It's an ancient gift of the lip, steady creating, activating, passing vocal vibrations to the blind plus the seeing. Human doesn't mean just being. Becoming. Don't believe it, just be life it. Belongings or beloved, rehearse it and recite it. While shining, drop your guns and move your tongues. Battle motivation in no time, lyrics come. Sometimes fun, others run their mouth or run away. Minds co-beaming, should be co-beaming like an early sun ray. One day we'll get the picture and all combine. Less talking about mine is mine and become one mind. Every piece of the puzzle has its place to build a piece of the puzzle called the human race. Yeah, man, that really made me sad when that guy just like stopped the whole rebel platoon. Nobody wanna be, what is that line? I gotta remember that for the rest of my life, man. A mean time, an aggressive time, a time when cynicism rots the vine, a time where violence blocks the summer shine. Lifetimes go by in a flash in a search for love, in a search for cash. Everybody wanna be some fat tycoon. Everybody wanna be on a tropical moon. Nobody wanna sing a little bit out of tune or be the backbone of a rebel platoon. It's too soon to step out of line. You might get laughed at or you might get fined. It's good shit, right? You can't pass the buck or the baton. You can't pass the police or the Pentagon, the IRS or the upper echelon. It's time to make a move on to contradiction. Bomb, bomb. Rock the nation. Take over corporation and radio station. Give the corporation some complications. Nobody listens. Michael Franti, the song is Rock the Nation, in case any of you were wondering. The whole album is really good.
The last time I saw that dude live, I felt like I was at an NSYNC concert or something. What comes after the middle pillar? I mean, it depends on the tradition, the lineage you're working in. Honestly, for me, for my purposes, the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram and the middle pillar are all you really need to do. You know, I mean, I read a lot of the other rituals, practiced a few of them. But unless there's like a specific application for something that you're doing, if your goal is only to maximize your own relationship with your higher self and to realize that in the world somehow, then those two things are all you need. You don't need to spend, your life doing. And also, you don't just, you need to learn the techniques as they're written at first. And this is interesting because I was told this by both my maestro with the Shawarwe and ayahuasca and also in the Hermetic tradition. It's the same. You learn the rituals as they're written, but then once you have mastery of them, you modify them to suit yourself, right? So when I do the LBRP, I don't actually just invoke the four archangels. There are three other names that I'm not going to mention that relate to me in a certain way, and so I added those. And one thing that you don't want to do is mess with the attributions of directions and elements because they're not arbitrary. There are reasons for them. But like I'm trying to figure out how I could explain this without. What you can change is you can make certain additions, but not until you understand why you're doing it, I guess, is the best I can do. But you do eventually modify them to suit yourself more, with better concision or whatever. And there are also different types of rituals that have purposes that particularly artists and musicians get a lot of utility from. Actors do this sometimes. The Assumption of God forms, right? So you choose some archetype or deity that you want to embody. You want to integrate their energy, and you drape your temple room in their colors. If it's solar, gold, and you burn a solar incense, and you listen to Hymn of Ra, and you know what I mean? And the objective is not to invoke or evoke, but to identify your consciousness completely with this. And like David Bowie would do this before he went on stage sometimes to get into certain characters, and Tool does similar things even. So it really just depends on the individual. This is really a very highly individualized. It's not even a tradition, really, because it looks that way from inside the tradition, right? But one of my objectives and one of my methods actually for finding truth has always been to look for cultural consistency in disparate regions, for example, right? And when you see that, then you figure, good chance you have found some truth, right? So every culture I'm aware of that has any kind of shamanic or magical tradition casts a circle. It represents basically the same thing. This is the area where the magician is responsible for the energy inside. You designate the four corners or acknowledge them in some way. You know what I mean? There are certain things that are so consistent around the world that you really can't attribute these things to anyone anywhere because they're everywhere. And those are the things that I give the most clout to. Like tobacco, for example. No one should ever smoke it according to YouTube. And I want to make it clear that I'm not promoting it or saying anything good about it. I'm just mentioning that people in North and South America traditionally have used it for protection and whatnot. And there are very, very similar practices and perceptions that are highly specific that are found in like the Blackfoot and, way down the other tip of South America at the furthest south point that the plant grows. So then we're like, well, they're probably using it correctly, yeah, so. And once you understand the Hermetic, or well, not the Hermetic, but the one you asked about, the lesser banishing ritual, the pentagram. Once you understand what you're doing, you can write your own rituals. You don't, you know what I mean? Once you have some mastery, you understand the symbolism, you can put them together yourself. You can engineer them yourself. What I would suggest is to follow the general guidelines of like every hermetic order ever, and do the LBRP, invoking in the morning and banishing at night for a whole year. And by the time you're done, you'll be ready to start engineering your own ceremonial processes if you feel so inclined. All right, cheers, guys. I think I'm gonna pop off because I can tell I'm getting a little dingy. I'm not answering your questions fluidly and whatnot. And the ayahuasca was pretty strong last night, and I saw the sun come up for sure, so I'm not surprised. I'm a little bit drained. For those of you that just arrived, please hit the like button, share, subscribe. Consider becoming a patron. We are demonetized. Also, go to my Substack and subscribe to that because I can say anything I want over there, and they won't do anything mean to me. So thank you so much for being here. Come see us at the retreat in January, into January, February, April, June. Lots and lots of open times throughout the spring and summer. We're doing it until the fall this year. So, cheers, guys. I will see you Thursday or Friday.